everyone, it's Tina-Desiree Berg here, filling in for Jordan today. One last day, you have me. I have a very special guest with me today. You know him on Twitter as Nick Socialist MMA, or the Progressive Martial Artist. He is an activist. He's working on areas of abolishing ICE, to fund the police, and a few other things. So I wanted to start the top of the show off with an interview that Jordan did with Nick in South Carolina during the primary. So you get a little feel for what Nick is about, and we'll allow that to play while some more people join in the live stream, and then we'll get into the conversation with Nick.
So you gotta wonder, what does that say about the Democratic Party in general? Because we saw the results in Nevada, right? So Bernie Sanders has 52% Hispanic support. And this is the party that claims they represent the Hispanics, right?
73%.
Yeah, 73%, absolutely. That's so that's even more outstanding. So what does that say about the party? That they are going to completely ignore the will of the voters that they claim to say they represent, right? So you see, what we've been hearing our entire life, we need to have a base of young people. We need to have a strong base of Hispanics, our largest growing population. So you see a party that is now looking to spit right in the face of the largest voting bloc we have in our party. That just shows how out of touch they are as party elites. And this is the point I've been making for a while. I think Democrats much rather have Trump win again than have Bernie Sanders, because Nancy Pelosi fundraises on Trump. It allows them, like Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren, they vote for the trade deals, vote for the military deals, but you hear nothing but Trump noise. So they allowed to make votes that would otherwise be a little bit more harmful if they was under Obama or something. But now they have the cover of Trump. So now that they tried their best to win with Biden, I do honestly think that. I think once they saw that Biden was tanking down, and that Bernie had a strong chance to win the nomination, I think it's clear that they're doing anything they can to tank their chances, because I think Bernie had a strong chance to win the nomination. And my question to any Warren supporters or any Democrats in general who are never Bernie, for example, who want to beat Trump, let me ask you this. So how does it make sense? You think you're going to beat Donald Trump in the Electoral College if you can't even beat Bernie Sanders or win your own party nomination popular vote? That doesn't make any sense. So when I put these things together, it makes it seem like they don't want to win. They wanted to win with Biden, but now Biden's going to lose. They put Bloomberg in the race knowing that he probably don't stand a chance, but they was the kind of delusional thing they can take out Sanders. But now that they see Bernie's kind of like riding on the wall, I think they're trying to do everything they can to take their chances. So you see, why would they say that on TV? Like, they're being openly anti-democratic. Because like I said, I honestly think you're going to see a lot of weird action from Democrats, because I honestly do think they'd rather have Trump win than Bernie win.
Well, it really comes down to your definition of win. And welcome new Status Coup member, Shane. We are now 4 members away. Count them, 4 members away from hitting 1,600. I need 4 more of you. Sign up. Low is a cup of coffee a month, Starbucks coffee a month. Statuscoup.com/join. It's the only way we could fund this. Tomorrow we're headed to Columbia to cover Bernie, who's going to be in Columbia, South Carolina. Saturday we'll be here for the primary, monitoring the fuckery. Then, as far as you take us, we have not booked a flight for Super Tuesday yet. We're waiting to see how much funding we could get before then. So it actually makes a difference how many signups we get. It makes a difference where we could actually go for Super Tuesday. It makes a difference where we could go after Super Tuesday. I'm ready. Jamal's ready. We're willing to go all over the place, but we need you. Statuscoup.com/join.
Okay, so that was Jordan interviewing Nick in South Carolina. I'm just waiting for a few more people to come into the live stream, because we want to make sure we have an audience before we get started. So I'm going to bring Nick in. Welcome, Nick. Nick is known as Socialist MMA on Twitter, or Progressive Martial Artist. Thanks for joining me today, Nick.
Yeah, I'm glad to be on. As you guys seen, Status Coup was one of the first places that really gave me a platform when I was doing my activism. So I'm still in the game. I mean, 2020 was a giant L for the left, but that doesn't stop us from working. It doesn't stop me from wanting to make change and to hold the power accountable. So that's the main focus I have on my Twitter and through my streams, through my writing, is holding power accountable, even though who I call the enemy, Joe Biden, even though he won, we still have to put pressure on him. We still gotta continue to put pressure on power, and that's the main focus of what I'm trying to do. And I'm glad to be here because you guys first one gave me a platform, and I kind of want to model what I do based on like the citizen journalism that you guys do. That's why I call myself a citizen journalist, because I think as long as you can share a story, you can call yourself a journalist. I mean, obviously there's some fraudsters, people who lie, but your credibility stands on its own. I mean, anyone knows if you're credible or not. But if you can show a story, if you can hold power accountable, you are worthy of a platform, and that's why I'm glad that you guys do that. And that's something that I focus on my show too. So I'm glad to be back on here.
Right on, right on. Now, I'm glad you were able to join me today. So first, right off the top, let's talk about the journey you took to become an activist. What are some of the stories that led you to the place that you're at today? I don't think you started in South Carolina. I think there was stuff that happened prior to that that motivated you to be there and has continued to motivate you to do more activism. You're now writing. You consider yourself a citizen journalist. So what are some of those background stories?
So most people my age, I was just turned 30, celebrating my birthday last
Happy
week.
birthday.
Thank you. But a lot of people who was politically active, we grew up during the George Bush administration, during the rise of the Iraq War. That would kind of radicalize me. And then throughout the years, I learned more about how government works. And I'm pretty open. I used to show my old tweets of how I used to be very supportive of Barack Obama, because that's back when I thought we have an anti-war movement. That's what got me into politics. I guess every generation has something that's different, whether it be the AIDS crisis in the 80s or name the issue, name what the Rodney King riots in the 90s.
Right.
Different generations had different reasons to get on politics. Iraq War, Hurricane Katrina, seeing the Republican Party constantly implementing anti-Black policies and beliefs. And then I falsely assumed that since Republicans are anti-Black, that means the opposition must be pro-Black and must be looking towards the best towards our communities.
Right.
And that wasn't the case.
Nope.
And 2012 was the last time I voted for the lesser 2 years. And I remember I even tried to rationalize it back then. Well, I'm like, oh yeah, maybe the Democrats was a disappointment. But Mitt Romney, he's the biggest evil. Then I had to realize the reason why I got in politics in the first place was to oppose war, to oppose the power of Wall Street. Because, I mean, once again, there's people who they have their political beliefs because they read a lot of theory. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Educating yourself, education is good. But then there's people who have our political beliefs because they live that life. Bernie Sanders lived that life. His family was killed in the Holocaust. He grew up poor. So Bernie Sanders, he read a lot there. He talked about how he studied political theory in libraries throughout his 20s and 30s.
Right.
But he was led that way because of life experience. And that's why I feel like that's how I feel. Because I'm looking at all the money we spend in war. I'm looking at the state of the Black community and the quality of life that our generation is living compared to even boomers. Even in disenfranchised communities, they seem to be doing better off.
Yeah.
And it's something that interests me. I'm like, okay, I oppose the Republican Party. I oppose George Bush because they implemented trickle-down economics. They implemented tax cuts for the rich. So I'm like, okay, that's why Republicans are bad. So now I'm doing research because obviously if you watch MSNBC, like I had my grandfather, God bless his heart, he watched MSNBC all the time. You don't know a lot of stuff. You just watch cable news. If you watching MSNBC and CNN, who pretty much just play defense for a Democrat Party, you're not gonna know the true details of the policies. So I'm over here thinking that George Bush is evil because he pushed trickle down. But I'm like, okay, Obama is just progressive. Joe Biden literally bragged with Mitch McConnell how they got George Bush tax cuts permanent.
Right.
So I'm looking at this. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm politically homeless.
Yeah.
Right? Then and this is a lot of people don't understand. Yeah. I voted for Stein in 2016 and I voted for Green Party this time. That was not because I'm salty Bernie Sanders lost. I mean, before I even knew who Bernie Sanders was, I was like, okay, I'm not voting for Hillary Clinton. I had that made up in my mind even before I knew he was. Yeah. Then I learned who he was about 3 weeks after he launched his campaign. I'm like, oh, thank God I have someone I can support. Now, don't get me, I still remember your question. Now, this is to answer your question.
No, you're answering that. You're telling me the stories that brought you to this place. So basically, you're in a position where you went to the Democrats initially because you thought they were the opposition party, and then after learning more and more about the Democratic Party, you had the realization that they weren't really an opposition party. They were a soft opposition, and in many cases were enabling some of the worst acts of the GOP.
I'm one of the people that I want to see results, and I'm more policy based. I don't like the pageantry of politics. You guys see, I didn't cover like the inauguration and all this. I don't care about like the show of politics. I just want to see the results. And if at the end of the Barack Obama administration, if disenfranchised communities was doing amazing because of policies that he implemented, if income inequality didn't get worse, if black wealth didn't tank, if we didn't have an immigration crisis that Trump took advantage of that he started, I mean, he actually legitimately did a great job. I wouldn't have the position I have. Like, there was no one who wanted Barack Obama and the Democratic Party to be successful than me. But there's only one class that was protected during the years of Barack Obama. And that was the white liberal class. And that's why they love him so much. Meanwhile, he bombed Muslim communities en masse. He literally built up this immigration system that let lead eyes. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But he destroyed the Latino community. He destroyed the black community, destroyed our wealth. He was complicit with the Flint water crisis, cracked our heads in Ferguson. He literally cracked the heads of Native Americans to Standing Rock. So what community did he not go after other than the white liberal class? That's why they like him. And that's why he got his mansion now. And Martha Vineyard, I believe. Because he did his job. He protected Wall Street. He had Eric Holder, who was pretty much an undercover agent of Wall Street, who destroyed black lives through their policies. And so people were like, I don't have to dislike Obama because I wanted to. It's because I'm like, what other option do I have? So then 2016 come, and I'm thinking, because I guess I was young and politically naive, I'm looking at Hillary Clinton, I'm looking at Barack Obama. I didn't understand I can write articles about it now, about media bias and how propaganda influenced people's mind. But I'm looking at my community. I don't know anyone who likes these people. And I'm like, I see Bernie Sanders talking about universal health care. I see polls that show it's popular. In 2016, I'm gonna be honest, I dropped the ball because I'm like, bro, we're gonna win. Like, what? Like, I was one of those people that was like, there's no way that Hillary Clinton could defeat Bernie Sanders. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Because I looked into Bernie Sanders very critically because I didn't trust anybody. I was like, oh, he's another old white dude. And then I looked into him and I was like, oh, he actually got the background, he got the policies.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not perfect. He's not the perfect person. He's mostly a compromise. But when you actually look at who we was dealing with at the time, I mean, he was the best candidate in the modern era. He lost to Hillary Clinton, and I'm like, what? How is that possible? How is that possible? I mean, that's we can
a whole host of reasons: voter suppression tactics that the party uses, machinations from the party. I mean, there are things that they can do, obviously, to control the narrative. But yeah, they didn't want Bernie Sanders. They were very threatened by the fact that he was against the wealthy elites. And, you know, the Democratic Party has a long time problem now of trying to serve two masters, meaning they try to serve the working class and they're also trying to serve the corporate elites that fund them at the same time. And these things cannot be done at the same time. They're just in juxtaposition of each other. So it's a problem. Yeah, so that's how you became awake, right?
Yeah, and that what got me back to activism, because once again, that's a long way to explain it. But then, once again, I dropped the ball in 2016. I assumed that we was going to win. Then 2020 came, and I was preparing for this for years. I mean, I wasn't active on Twitter. A lot of people know me on Twitter now, but I didn't really start tweeting until late 2018. And I only got it because I wanted to help spread the progressive message. I'm like, okay, I'm all in. I can't watch this guy lose 2 times without me doing anything. And then to the point where I even quit my job. And that's why I went on the road and canvassed in multiple states. And we lost that race. But to this day, I can say I left it all on the line. Yeah. I literally knocked on untold amount of doors, thousands of doors over the course of 7 to 8 weeks. So there's a lot of people who dislike my political opinions. A lot of people don't like me. And they always want to smear leftists as like grifters, or like, oh, you're just some sort of grifter. I'm like, bro, I guarantee. And once again, I'm not saying this as bragging. I'm saying this as a defense.
Right.
As a defense. No, there's not many people that have done more to this movement than I have. So if anyone can be critical of Bernie Sanders, it should be me because I literally quit my job and put hours and hours on the campaign. Met a lot of great people. Literally talked to people who are really struggling, and I thought I was radical. I make a joke all the time.
Yeah.
I thought I was a leftist, but if you compare me now to how I was in January last year, I was like a moderate. Like compared now, because I'm like, I was so optimistic on how things was gonna work out.
Right.
I was constantly propping up the squad and just believing that everything was gonna we're gonna win this election, we're gonna win this. Now I'm like, we need to find other avenues, whether it be through direct ballot initiatives. That's why I'm really into ranked choice voting, breaktheduopoly.org, and being part of 10 demands and activist groups where we can actually make change on the local level. Because I'm like, dude, we getting our ass beat on the federal level, and it doesn't make any sense. The only reason we're losing is because we don't have control of the media apparatus and we don't have the money to fight the propaganda. Because how is it that you look at the exit polls and everyone support Medicare for all, everyone support progressive ideas, but then Joe Biden wins? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so we gotta take the fact that people are progressive at the core, but they're getting tricked into voting for establishment Democrats.
Right.
But we can overcome that through direct ballot initiatives. Because look at me, I'm in Missouri. Claire McCaskill lost in Missouri because she opposed legalizing marijuana. We passed medical marijuana. We passed increased minimum wages. While she ran her race like a right winger.
Right.
So in Missouri, we're a right wing hellhole. Don't get it twisted. But if you actually put these issues to a vote, people will support them. So I'm like, okay, we got our ass beat electorally in 2020, and now we have Democratic progressive members in Congress who are kind of pivoting to the right. And when I say that, I only mean that they don't have any intentions of challenging power. So they are being great stewards and great representatives of progressive policy. They're doing a good job finding Republicans. But if you can't rely on the squad or AOC or Bernie at this point to really challenge them to get policy done, so we gotta be strategic and figure out how we're gonna work as a grassroots movement to get this done. And the only way we can do that is by direct ballot initiatives. And once again, they don't always work. Like ranked choice voting, it didn't always win. I think it lost in Massachusetts, if I'm thinking right. But it lost one state this year, but it's not a 100% thing. But that's our best way to get it done. And if you are serious about third parties, I'm supportive of the People's Party. I voted for the Green Party last two presidential elections. I'm all about challenging the duopoly anyway.
Okay.
But if you are not serious about pushing ranked choice voting, you are not serious about a third party. And to the credit to the People's Party, to give them credit, I did talk to Nick Briner. That is something they are focusing on. But if that's not even on your top priority, and if you're advocating for third party, you gotta get serious. You gotta get your head in the game. That's all I'm saying.
Now, ranked choice voting, I think, is a key to that, absolutely. And in fact, I would say, they have ranked choice voting in the city of San Francisco. We don't have it in the state of California, obviously. But I can say without equivocation that the reason Chesa Boudin won his district attorney's office race was because of ranked choice voting, right? And this is a guy who is a public defender. He is the son of two Weather Underground members, so he grew up with leftist revolutionaries in his background. So this is a guy that's very much to the left, and we have not seen a district attorney come from that side of the aisle, and never, not once, I would say. So, and he's doing some interesting things up there, but he absolutely would not have won without ranked choice voting. So it's something we should pay attention to. You mentioned the 10 demands. I wanted to ask you about that. So 10 demands for justice. Walk me through a little bit of what those are. This is a nonprofit activist group that you set up with several others. You're a co-founder. So what are the 10 demands, and how did that come to be?
So I was part of the Casey protest, the George Floyd situation. I always was interested in police abolition because the Black community, what's been going on ever since the start of Black Lives Matter protests, this is just a continuation of the Ferguson protest, which was a continuation of Rodney King, which was a continuation of et cetera, right? So this is not a new story for us. There's a lot of people who just put Black Lives Matter in the profiles on the Twitter page, on the Facebook pages, who just now realize that this is the issue. But the Black community has been talking about this for decades. In our rap songs, and people thought we was being delusional. We was literally telling people this was happening for decades. Thank God we had the internet. Now people are seeing this and seeing the failed fascist police state for what it is.
Right.
For what it is, a system that is designed to protect white supremacy and to literally, it's a new level of way of having a system where you can go after disenfranchised classes. It's a new Jim Crow. That's what the drug war is.
Right.
They were open about the fact that drug war was used to go after enemies. And then there was an FBI report, because once again, our enemies are not necessarily dumb. But we have
Right.
white supremacists that after the civil rights movement, they're like, okay, our best step forward is joining law enforcement, because that's how we can implement our racial hierarchy that way. So that's what the police is designed to do. That's why you have liberals all the time. I like to call them the Amy Cooper Democrats.
Yeah.
People who they understand the racial hierarchy, so they be like, okay, we're gonna call the police on you, and I'm gonna make something up.
Right.
So they're gonna protect me. And just like the MAGA people, there was a lot of MAGA people who was interviewed after the insurrection. Where they was like, wait, you guys are not supposed to be going after us. Like, we're supposed to be the good guy. There was a lot of people, not a lot of them,
Right.
who was legitimately confused when the police turned against them at the very mild way they did. Because they understand, whether the liberal class and whether the conservatives admit it or not, they understand that this racial hierarchy that the police implements is a thing. They know it is. They know they benefit from it. That's why
Right.
they want to continue to advance it. And
That's
that's
right.
why they don't support defund the police, because it's not a problem of the slogan. It's never was a problem of the slogan, because it's not a slogan. It's a policy position.
It's a policy choice,
demand.
yeah.
It's a policy demand. And that's
Yeah.
what they don't like. And that's why when George Floyd happened, I'm like, okay, we got all this protest, we got all this organizing going on. So now we need to do massive effort of spreading awareness and putting that into actual legislation and putting actual pressure on politicians. Because it's one thing to have hashtag Black Lives Matter. Oh, I'm gonna change my profile pic to George Floyd because I want. There's a lot of performative stuff that liberals like do, but I'm like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want to do. So show solidarity. Do what best you can. But at the end of the day, I just want results, not want effort. I want to see actual result of our protests, and I want to see the ruling class being held accountable. So that's why we have the 10 demands for it.
Right.
That's why I wanted to communicate with activists, and we got a ton of grassroots activists that endorsed us, endorsed our demands. And there are a lot of other police abolition groups that got similar demands.
Yeah.
And it's very simple. Abolish the police state as we know it. And there's a path to get that done. Like, people are like, okay, you can't just get rid of police. You can't just do this, can't do that. And every single false liberal equivalency they have towards police abolition and defund the police, we address that through our plan. Check out 10demands.com. Like,
Right.
we can literally lay that out in the plan and how you get that done. And the first one, defund the police, because defund is a road to abolition, because that's literally
Right.
liberating our communities. And like liberals love to quote Angela Davis during the election, where she literally just said, I would personally vote for Joe Biden. She didn't say anyone else should. She just said that, but they was like, Angela Davis, she's a hero. We should listen to Angela Davis. But one of her life's work is police abolition. And she writes about how literally the police is designed to be an occupying force in our community. And they are. Because when I went to high school, when I had the police officer at my school, I ain't talked to one person who was like, yeah, that police officer, he really calmed me down. That police officer, he increased the tension of everyone. And
Absolutely.
there was immediately, like, he doesn't help. And that's just one of the main things. Like, in our demands, we very thorough. They're 10, but we go through a lot of detail. And removing police officers from schools is one of them. So,
yeah.
When I advocate for defund, when I advocate for 10 demands, when I advocate for the position I advocate for, I am just begging the liberal class, and I'm begging the conservative class, I'm begging the establishment to be serious about this. Because I told people, the critics of defund the police are deeply unserious people. Because they say, okay, we can't defund the police, we need to implement reforms. What reforms are you talking about? The most basic reforms that we support, disarming the police.
Yeah.
Disarm the police. Do you support that? No. What are you talking about then? What solutions? Because people don't understand. The Minneapolis Police Department, they already reformed 5 years ago.
And it changed nothing. Yeah. And it changed nothing.
Are you serious about this issue or are you not? Because I'm serious about this.
Nick, you're not wrong. I mean, okay, so let's talk about the liberal misunderstanding of this argument of defund the police. I see this mainly coming from liberals, not from conservatives, where they say don't use that slogan. And I always have to give myself pause and a deep breath because you're right. This is not a slogan. It's a policy position. Yeah. And I can use the Los Angeles Police Department to make a really clear case for this, right? So in Los Angeles, the LAPD takes up more than 50% of the city's budget. Are you kidding me? More than 50%. How did we get there, right? I'll tell you how we got there. We got there because the mayor's office kept adding things to the LAPD budget that simply don't belong there. For example, if part of the city cleanup crew goes downtown to sweep the streets, clean up the streets, whatever, they say that they can't go there without the LAPD into Skid Row because it's unsafe. So now, all of a sudden, that budget has been put into the LAPD section. Notifying the next of kin if somebody has passed away. That should be coming from the coroner's office. Nope. Move that over into the LAPD budget. Issues surrounding mental health. We can go down the list. There's a very long list of things that are now tasked as being part of the LAPD. They don't belong there. These are not things that need to be done with any person armed with a gun. It's insane that we are doing this. So how do they not understand this,
Our entire system is just a shitty right-wing version of what progressive policy should be in place for in the first place. What do I mean by that? Because if you look at the police budgets, now once again, this is spanned to the military-industrial complex as well.
Right.
Because I tie those two things together. A lot of people don't understand when you see with the police violence at the protests and them literally committing war crimes against their citizens. That's U.S. imperialism coming home.
100%.
This is what people go through all the time in the countries that we destabilize, and to the point where you literally you had Israeli police who train American police on the tactics they use to crack down on the Palestinians. It's a giant. It's all connected. It's literally all connected. And what I mean by they implement progressive policy, but they do it in a horrible right-wing way. Because if you look at the military budget, and you look at the police budget, it's literally a giant jobs program.
Yeah.
Do people understand? Like we progressives, what do we propose? We propose a Green New Deal, which I got on my shirt right here, and a federal jobs guarantee. Because that's how you put Americans to work. That's how you stimulate the economy. And we can do that, and we can do that in a positive way. We can implement a Green New Deal, have a job guarantee, where we can literally implement green energy that will boost the economy, and that will save us money that will cost, because if we don't do that, that will cost our economy trillions of dollars in the long haul. So these are the job programs that progressives and what the liberals, and not liberal, but the progressives and the leftists, we want to implement. The job program that right-wingers and the social program that they implement is the military and do the police budgets, because they will openly admit that these giant police budgets don't work. And this is, you talk about liberal misconceptions. This is one I call them all the time, because they had Al Sharpton. And he was just one of many. This is an argument you see them use all the time. We have all this violence in the Black community. We have all this violence in inner cities and disenfranchised communities. So if you defund the police, that will hurt their communities. Defund the police is a policy demand with a lot of white out-of-touch people who won't be affected by it, but Black people actually don't support it. For one, that's a lie. Yeah, because even when defund the police was at its most popular, 538 did release a story, and no one read the story because the story was like defund the police is massively unpopular, right? And everyone ran with it like, oh yeah, that defund police is -30 on approval rating. But then the article said there's only two groups that support it: Black people and Democrats. Black people and Democrats. So it was never true. The smear they use, they always say defund police is full of white activists. Never true, because if you look at the polling, the only people who supported it, even if it's most unpopular, was Black people. And so they say, now back to the misconception. We're gonna hurt the Black community by defunding the police because the crime rate in these communities is so high. And I'm like, okay, let's look at the NYPD budget. So if the crime rate is high, doesn't that prove that your system of having high crime budget
isn't working?
It doesn't work.
Right.
Meanwhile, there are studies, and we look at other countries who implement policy where these budgets are allocated to mental health resources, to healthcare, to increase education. Those are actual proven things to reduce crime. So that's why I say critics of defund the police are deeply unserious people. because we are the ones who are advocating for policy that decrease crime. Meanwhile, you guys say we need to keep giant police budgets because we have high crime rates, even though those giant police budgets not doing anything to stop the crime rates.
Right. Right.
So
no,
I'm asking them to get serious.
right.
That's the only thing I want. I want you guys to get serious. I want you guys to, if you have, and this is a question that we propose all the time. If you have a problem with 10 demands, if you have a problem with defunding police, I want to hear the alternative. What's your alternative? You never see them mention that, don't you? They never bring up the alternative because I'm like, okay, what's the reform? Okay, you want reform? You don't want to defund? Okay, here, I'll give you this one. Disarm police. They don't want to do it.
They don't want to do it.
And qualified immunity. They don't want to do it. That's why I'm like, bro, even the reform that will work, you guys don't want to do that. So just be honest. So when Barack Obama come out against this issue, I just want you to be honest. I just want you to be like, okay, I don't agree with you on policy. And Democrats don't do that. Why don't they do that? Because they know that will hurt them electorally. That's right. And they spin it as the opposite way, didn't they? They said that we run on if we run on defund the police, we'd be hurt down ballot. Meanwhile, Republicans attack Raphael Warnock and say he's going to defend the police, and he won his election. It doesn't work. And we just got the new studies that came out this month that the mainstream media conveniently didn't cover. They conveniently didn't cover. I covered it on my show.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't cover it on their show because there are a lot of progressive media that was like, okay, defund the police. That's a controversial subject, so they didn't want to touch it.
And it shouldn't be. Why? I mean, look. I mean, you're 100% right when you talk about the social programs that are instated in other countries. It reduces the crime rate. That is what will reduce the crime rate. People don't. I mean, there's a group of criminals, and that's got nothing to do with race, that are going to be criminals no matter what, right? That's just we're going to put those folks aside. It's not the majority of people that commit crime. Most folks are coming from a place of socioeconomic insecurity, right? That's what's driving a lot of the crimes that we see. So once you take care of that, replace that with programs that are meant to correct that, you're going to see a drop in the crime rate. This is statistically proven. We know this as a fact. So I think when people understand that, they no longer back away from this idea of defunding the police. When they hear the data, it's over half the city budget. We are not correcting these other problems that would be more effective. I think, we can convince more people that this is the way to go.
Yeah, and that's why you're seeing that's maybe the next piece I'm writing right now, because I already got that kind of outlined out how I want to write about the meteoric rise of defund the police. 55% independent support now, 73% of Democrats, and once again, you don't hear the media cover that. And those numbers, and I even admitted at the time, I said, yeah, the numbers was abysmal in the summer. It was. Like, a lot of people didn't support the idea. They're like, oh, what? You're going to boss the police? Like, it was that's when the height of the liberal stereo, because they was working against us. The corporate media was fear-mongering around it. Right. And they were smearing Black Lives Matter activists as rioters and thugs. The so-called liberal media was doing that as well. Yeah. So my thing is, and this is the criticism I have, this is why I tell people you got to support people with different perspectives, because there's a lot of popular like white progressives, but you need to get perspective from people of color as well, because a lot of those white progressives, I noticed they didn't cover this because they saw this as they were like, okay, we want to talk about Medicare for all because they know that's a popular policy. They didn't want to touch defund police because it was touchy. It was touchy. They didn't want to rub elbows. I literally know. I didn't want to call anyone out because I like a lot of these people. I do like a lot of them, but they're just something I noticed because I'm like, okay, we doing this work on our own. This is why we stepped up at 10 demands, because I'm like, when you look at the civil rights movement wasn't popular when it first started.
That's right.
The bus sit-ins was not popular when it first started. The restaurant sit-ins only had like 74% disapproval rate. So I was telling people literally in the summer in my live streams when I first getting started, I said, yeah, it's an unpopular issue right now, but we are on the right side. Like, you can pull my old clips up. I was telling people like, yo, we on the right side of the issue. Just like Medicare for all, just like other progressive ideas. All we have to do is keep educating people. And I didn't even understand how fast it was going to be. I was like, it may take a year, it may take 2 years, it may take 5 years, but we can win the issue. That is so important because I think this is the new civil rights era 2.0, the fight to defund the police, because it's such a racist institution that's killing us. I think it's literally as important of a progressive idea that we can advance for, but a lot of people want to shy away from it. And I'm telling people, like, we need people to continue to snipe at it, which our group did, because that's how we win the progressive ideas at the end of the day. Bernie Sanders wasn't advocating for popular ideas from day one. He made those ideas popular because he advocated for them. So if you're one of the people that run away from defund the police, and this is why, once again, I put all the work in for Bernie Sanders, but people who think I don't got legitimate criticism, you're out of your mind. Because Bernie Sanders came out against defund the police. And I'm like, dude, that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. And to be fair to Bernie Sanders, though, he did have a great criminal justice program. Once again, I talk about all those good reforms. He did implement those reforms. So I'm not one of the people that are like, he's not an enemy. But if you don't think there's something to criticize him on, you're out of your mind. And that's something that he need to get his act together. And anyone else on the progressive side, where I'm coming from, if you're not supportive of defund police, you need to get your act together, because you're missing one massive part of the injustice of this country.
Yeah,
because a lot of you guys, you understand the healthcare injustice that's going on. A lot of you guys understand the injustice of the U.S. imperialism. But I wrote in my last article, Black people are dying because we don't have healthcare.
Right.
We are dying because of this stuff.
Yeah.
So we are dying because the racist police system is going out. They are killing us. So there's two things. Like they understand the healthcare. They understand that we are dying because of healthcare, but they don't understand that this fascist police system is going after us. Right. 1 out of 3 black men are scheduled to go to jail in their life. 1 out of 6 Latinos.
That's insane.
And people think that's an accident. I want you to explain. Do you think Black people are inherently evil? Because everyone does crimes, and this is one thing we talk about on 10 Demands. You gotta understand the theory behind what we were talking about, because everyone commits crime. Look at the Wall Street fraudsters. Right. Look at the crimes that Wall Street commit all the time. Do they go to jail?
No.
Do they go to jail?
No, they don't. You know,
you literally
this
have
is important. What you're saying now is important about per capita. There's a real disconnect between crimes committed and people that go to jail for those crimes. Per capita, it is absolutely inarguably true that there are more Black folks in jail for crimes, and there are less white people in jail for crimes they commit. The rate of crime doesn't change between the two groups. What changes is the rate of incarceration. That is absolutely the case.
I do not like hearing like progressives or liberals quote Angela Davis or Frederick Hampton unless they understand what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Because what she was talking about when she wrote about police abolition is you got to understand that the police criminalize our communities. Yeah. So all these things, like right when we were saying, Black people, they commit all these crimes. No, these are the crimes that our system chooses to enforce.
That's right.
Because remember, look at the massive amount of white collar crimes that go on in our country. You literally have celebrities that got caught in fraud and paying off educators to allow other people to get into school and educate. Like these are crimes.
Exactly.
Do they criminalize that component in our society? When you have our government bombing weddings and bombing people, is that criminalized? No. People are like, oh, Black people are inherently violent. I'm like, okay, you got our government who are bombing and overthrowing governments. Like there's over 2 million people, 2 million dead Iraqis because of the Iraq war, and that's directly because of Joe Biden. Yeah. So that's in my eyes, that's 2 million deaths that's on his head. And you want to tell me that our community more violent than that? Our community not destabilizing governments. The only difference is who are being criminalized. We got George Bush, a war criminal that's celebrated to this day because his crimes and what he did was not criminalized. Meanwhile, you got Black people, the same. There was a Black lady who was caught using a different address because she wanted to go send her kids to a different school district, and she got sent to prison for 5 years. And these celebrities who got caught paying off the universities a higher level of fraud, they get like a month probation. Yep. So this is what we want people to understand when we talk about ending the carceral system, because it's inherently racist. If you disagree with that, that means you have a giant blind spot. So if you're good on healthcare, good for you. If you're good on war, good for you. But if you got a blind spot on this issue, that's a giant part of society you're missing out on.
I agree.
Because the death penalty. Once again, I had a lot of stupid liberal beliefs back in my day. I used to be like, yeah, the death penalty is justified because I had a lot of stupid liberal beliefs. Back in the day, I used to literally believe that. But now, if you actually do research, the death penalty is just a way for them to kill Black people. Because you got people that commit the same crimes who are white, who are Asian, who are different ethnicities. They don't get the death penalty, but they give the Black people like literally 3-5 times the rate of white people. So I'm like, this is simple education that we need people to understand, and this is why the conservative state needs to be taken down. And we can start with defund the police. And that's why that's gaining popularity. And then what we gain with 10 Demands, once we defund the police and we empower the communities, and once we actually decrease the crime rate, we can create a system where we have a road abolition. Because why would we need this? Why would we need the police system that has never historically ever worked? It never worked. because they,
Right.
back in the day, once again, just make it very brief. I can talk about this forever, but to make it real brief, the police back in the 1800s in America was the Puritan police. That's all they did. They started out as slave patrol.
They were slave catchers, yeah.
You have people who they start out literally as slave catchers.
Yep.
And then they decided to establish some sort of order that can stop crimes. But they didn't stop crime though. They acted as a way to prevent people from committing adultery. They will stop people from having gay affairs. They will enforce the rules of the church. Like they will look for people who are breaking the rules of the Bible. Like they didn't actually stop crime. So they locked the police back. That's covered in the outlaw movies. Like even to this day, the police was historically corrupt because they got paid off by outlaw gangs back in the day. And they actually did nothing to stop those crimes. You had a lot of rapes that would happen. They would never even investigate. And I'm talking about the origins of the police in America. So I'm not even talking about the slave patrol. I'm talking about the police as they started out. As we know, it never was proven to be an effective system. And then what happened? We started the drug war, Al Capone in the 20s. Then the police got paid off again by Al Capone and them. So it's like, when I say the critics of defund the police are not serious, I am asking you, I'm legitimately asking anyone, tell me when has this system of policing ever existed, like where it worked? Because I haven't seen it. When have it ever worked? Because I can point at any point in history and I can tell you where and why it was used against disenfranchised community and how they was always bought up and corrupted. Like that's literally what they're designed to be.
That is what they're designed to do.
So we want to set up a system where our communities can empower themselves, can govern themselves like it used to be. In every other society that we had during the Lion era, you had communities policing each other. And then what Angela Davis writes about, once again, a lot of people don't read her writing, the police as we have it now is a byproduct of capitalism. Because before the capitalism, we literally had communities take care of each other. But now we have a vested interest to imposing this police state. Once again, going back to why we have this giant police budget. It's pretty much a job program. And once again, you got the prison industrial complex. All this stuff connects. They get paid for this stuff. So if you're on the left, my overall point is, if you understand this, you got a massive blind spot, whether you know it or not. But I'm very happy because we made a lot of ground. And I covered all the polls again, 55% independents, 74% Democrats. And now because of the Capitol insurrection, because now there's a lot of police being caught, implicated in that, a lot of police are literally being busted, being part of the right-wing groups.
Yeah, 100%.
There's a story where a lot of right-wingers, when it came at the Michigan governor, the police was literally apologizing for them. Like, now this stuff is being blasted out, and it's only gonna get better. It's only gonna get better, and I don't know how long Joe Biden and the Democrats can hold the line, because they still like, we gonna fund police more. We saw how Kamala Harris was brutally rejected by our community. She was chosen by the ruling class, but I posted a link on poll all the time. Before she dropped out, she only had 1% black support, because we don't accept this police bullshit anymore. At least our generation. And that's
nor should you. I mean, look, you're right about everything you're saying. And specifically now, a lot of the police activity is designed to protect private property or to protect government property. And that's what they're tasked with, right? When you're at the protest, what they're most concerned with, if you watch the police department's actions, is generally protecting private property, right? Their concern with Antifa is that they think they're going to smash windows or something. Also, the gang thing. So specifically in Los Angeles, we've had an ongoing issue with gangs in the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. We've had the FBI conduct investigations. Recently, we elected a new sheriff that was going to do something about this. He's done nothing about it. I wanted to play an interview for you. I spoke with Dijon Kizzie's aunt a couple weeks ago at a protest against Alex Villanueva, our sheriff. Now, if the audience isn't familiar with Dijon Kizzie, he was murdered by the LA Sheriff's Department last August. Basically, to give you the abridged version of the story, he was on his bike going down the street in South Central. They pulled him over. Some back and forth ensued, and he ran away, obviously, because these guys have been known to murder people. And he had been carrying a jacket. He dropped the jacket. A gun fell out. This is what the police are saying, that there was a gun and that they were, the typical thing, I'm afraid for my life. So they ended up murdering Dijon there on the street. Yeah. But I want to play this interview because this is Dijon's aunt, and she's still dealing with the loss. Obviously, this is fresh, and really trying to figure out how we push forward and change Los Angeles, because Los Angeles has got a very deadly police force, both in the LASD and the LAPD. A really strong history here. You mentioned Rodney King early on. That wasn't even the start of it, right? So let me play this interview, and then we'll talk about what she's saying.
Not one on my priority, but it is a priority to let an impact be known in our community, and also to Sheriff Villanueva and the sheriffs that work underneath him, that we have a loss in our families. For the people in the communities, we're lost our loved ones, we can't get them back. And basically what we want is we want accountability, and he won't give us that. We want the names of the deputies who killed our loved ones. And so that's basically why I'm here. That's why I protest. That's why I cry, I scream. Community activists trying to get results for people, not only my family, but other people who've been affected by police brutality. So I'm here today just to let him feel uncomfortable the way we felt uncomfortable, and then also let it be shown that it's a peaceful way to get results rather than resorting to violence.
Let me ask you this. Alex Villanueva actually campaigned as a leftist reformer. He campaigned as a Bernie crowd, a Bernie Sanders supporter. He acknowledged the existence of gangs, all of this stuff. And now it seems like he's not acknowledging any of that stuff. He's kind of turning a blind eye to it. How does that make you feel? Do you almost think that that's worse than the white supremacist that came before him, or do you also see him as a white supremacist that was lying while he was running for office? What I'm saying? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I could talk about that one for a while. So yes, I do believe that he already had those principles and those beliefs a little bit, but once he joined into and got deep into it, like any other gang or group or cult, once you're in, and you can't get out. So he did have some of those beliefs going in, just wanting to be a part of. And I believe that's where some of the name calling of one of his used to be comrades came in, where people won't fall in and play that cultural because we're all together, we're going to do this. Same thing that cultures in the police department, we're going to cover each other lies up. And so I believe he might have had a good soul, but it's been tainted because he has to keep the secrets and the lies within. So I think it's a combination of things.
I think that's fair. One of the things that they recently did is they made it a policy where these guys can now cover up their badges, which is egregious as fuck as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
What do you think of that?
I think it's disgusting, and I think it's not right. They want transparency from us at all times, and the police have gangs within the police departments. And I also heard that a gentleman, I wouldn't know if he's a gentleman, but that's just the way my mom raised me. He had the gang emblem onto his uniform, and it was woven in like, this is who I am, because that was his gang. Yeah. And he wanted to represent his gang because he's in the sheriff's, and this is what I did, oh look at me. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of things. So yeah, it's also about money. It's about money, power, and politics, but then also it's about that camaraderie of being able to do what we do. I'm the baby of 12, so I know about it. That's why I'm speaking about it. And I'm not going to tell on my brother. I'm not going to tell on my brother so my mom and my dad can whoop him. But if mom and dad finds out and they whoop him, then oh well. And if we all have to get it, then we all have to get it. And we'll all get that whooping, and we won't say anything. But this is different. We're talking about people dying. People's lives are being taken, and there's no accountability.
Yeah, it almost seems to me, this is just my opinion at this point, it almost seems to me that he has zero control over the department. Even if he wanted to be a reformer, he doesn't have the balls to be the reformer. He doesn't have the capacity to do what needs to be done. My personal belief at this point is I don't think the sheriff's department can be reformed. I think they're beyond reform. Mm-hmm. I think they just need to be just eliminated. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's an extreme position, or would you agree?
I do. I think that's extreme because we do need the police for certain duties, and I do believe there are good police officers.
Hang on, let me clarify. I do think what I'm saying is get rid of the sheriff's department, but have local police departments instead. Like right now.
Yes, absolutely. Because we have situations where people get into domestic situations with their lovers, and banks are being robbed. So we do need some type of control. But if we have an oversight committee that's from our communities, handpicked from our communities, nominated, it, then we have control over what they do. And it's not as if we want to, we just want democracy. It's not that we want to penalize everyone. We just want transparency, and we want what's fair for the people who have passed away. And where the record stands, only one person has gone to prison for killing someone. And we want the transparency. We want the names of the deputies who killed him. We won't have any problems with Villanueva at that point. Our attention and our energies will go somewhere else to seek justice for those. So if he doesn't want us at his door, he doesn't want us in front of the sheriff department, there's going to have to be some changes, and we won't stop. That's why the Los Angeles Coroner Department has stepped up and started saying, you know what, I know that this isn't right. When I examine these bodies, they're shot from the back. And so now it's becoming so, the evidence is so preponderous that it's oozing over the place. And no, Villanueva can't control it. And he doesn't have the savviness to do it. And I hate to compare him with Donald Trump, but same thing as Trump. They want the position, but they don't have the gravity to hold it.
Let me just say this. Do you have any final words that you would like to, you want to share?
Just thank you to the good officers, the officers that don't participate in this. But I'm asking for them also to find covert ways to also help us. If you are an officer and you're a sheriff and you know that this isn't right and you have to be a part of that bound of silence, you can find creative ways to help us. Throw us a lifeline. If you have a heart, throw us a lifeline. Give us the names of the ones who killed our loved ones, and then we can sleep at night and we won't keep doing these crazy things. So that's pretty much, it in a nutshell. I have lost all faith in the department. They don't look out for us. We're looking for Gaston to do something great. That's all I'm saying. We're looking for it. I'm not really convinced with our meeting where he says he can't open up all the cases. There's over 700 cases, and it was only like 40 of us who showed up. And for him to tell us that I can't look into all the cases, that's a slap in the face. So we want to see something happen. He wanted the job, he got the job, so now do the job, dude. That's all I got to say. No one likes to look as if they don't know the answer, but in this situation, they do. They know the answers. And once he knows that he gives us the police officers' names, that we're going to pursue them, and that's only right. It's only right. So why not?
Yeah, he needs to be compelled to release his names. It's absolutely insane that he hasn't done that. That, to me, is a travesty of justice beyond compare, especially when he's arguing that he's for transparency.
No, he's not.
He's not. He's absolutely not. And I could go on for days on this, too.
Anyway, I wanted to play that interview for you. That's Dijon Kizzy's auntie. So some of you are hearing this in the background. So I actually have one of these here. This is, it's a piggy. And it says on both sides, it says LASD sucks. And on the other side, it says ACAB, which folks will know that means all cops are bastards. So they squeak these sometimes at the protests against the LAPD. So just an explanation on that. And also I have folks asking me why that's a policy. That's a really good question. They're trying to protect their sheriffs from having to be accountable for what they've done. Covering up your badges, the excuse that Alex Villanueva gave for that was simply that they were getting doxxed by BLM activists, the sheriffs were getting doxxed by Antifa. But my thing is this is like, I'm sorry, you're out there on the street doing stuff. You should be accountable. And if you're getting doxxed for something, maybe you should be looking at your internal actions instead.
Yeah,
people have a right to know.
You're supposed to be you're a public figure. What are you talking about?
Exactly.
Like, the idea of you're being doxxed doesn't even make sense.
No.
Like, you're a public figure, and that's
how appalled are you by that, though, Nick? How appalled are you that this is literally the LASD policy right now, and it goes against what guidance they've been given by the state of California?
Man, we see it with ICE now, and this is the problem with these systems that are designed to enforce white supremacy. Whether you're dealing with the police, whether you're dealing with ICE, they always get a mind of their own.
Right.
And the liberal idea that we can have regulations and they're gonna regulate themselves, watch themselves, is kind of crazy to me. And I mean, if you look at the worst actions, like you look at the LAPD, Baltimore Police Department, you look at some of the worst police departments in America. I mean, they're run with Democratic mayors, Democratic cities. I mean, we are trying these reforms that the Democrat Party has advocated for a long time, but you see, it doesn't ever address the root cause of corruption. Right. And what they usually always say, and this is what we advocate in 10 Demands, we should reject any sort of program that pump more money into training programs. Because I'm asking you guys, like, how does putting money into training programs supposed to stop this from happening.
It's not.
Like it doesn't. Like
Right.
historically, what they do, they just literally just funnel that money into cop pensions, and they use that to enrich themselves. They use that to enrich the department. So that's why you gotta be very smart in how you advocate for combating this police state that even allows the LAPD to do this, right? Because
Right.
I want people to understand the root cause of these issues, because you will even have people who are more liberal minded who will say they are on our side, but they support these solutions that won't really fix the problem. If anything, they'll make them worse. You can't give our occupying force more money and then tell it to reform itself. That's essentially what they were trying to tell them to do.
And Biden said it too. Let's be honest. Yeah. His solution was to add more to the budget when he was questioned on this.
Yeah, I was really upset because you had, throughout the course of this election, I'm like, well, there's no way we can win, because Joe Biden, he was running to the right of Donald Trump on law enforcement. And he was saying he wanted to fund the cops more than Donald Trump wants to fund. He wanted to fund the military industrial complex in the military more than Donald Trump. And I'm like, I want people to get really serious about these issues, because if you are saying you're serious about climate change and you want to fight climate change, the U.S. military is the largest polluter in human history. It pollutes more than like 140 countries combined. No one's produced more CO2 emissions and overall pollution than the U.S. military. So you can't say you are serious about fighting climate change unless you're willing to cut the military budget by at least 50%. So I mean, I voted for the Green Party. They advocated for the right number. They said they want to cut for 70%. And even then it came with FYI, like, yeah, actually 70% is not really enough, but we start
it's an
there.
Improvement. Yeah,
so,
I hear you.
And I'm looking at our current situation where Bernie Sanders, to his credit, floated the idea to decrease the military budget by only 10%. Only 10%. And our Vice President, Kamala Harris, voted against that. The Democrat Party bound up and voted against that. So I only got to say, how serious are you guys when it really comes to fighting climate change? The Paris Climate Agreement is a step in the right direction, but I covered on my show before. It's not a good plan. It did not help.
Right.
And since I have the chance, I mean, I would love to explain why, because they get into the Paris Climate Agreement. A lot of people think that's a worthwhile thing. But you guys realize that 4 out of 5 of the largest countries were not even compliant with the agreement. And then out of all the countries, only like 20% was compliant with the agreement. A large part of the agreement was you have large companies who are supposed to finance smaller countries so they can have the infrastructure so they can decrease emissions. So what right-wingers always say, they say you can't fight climate change because even if we stop all U.S. emissions, you still got China, you still got all the other countries. And I'm like, okay, the Paris Climate Agreement actually wanted to get that done.
Right.
But they haven't even started the funding mechanism so the larger countries will fund money to the lower countries. And so I'm like, I'm not going to be opposed to you join the agreement, but I want you guys to understand that agreement has not done anything to stop climate change. And there have been reports constantly like, we're behind the mark. Countries are not being compliant. They're still not following the agreement. They still have high emissions. And largely it's because these larger countries ran by capitalists are not funding those states properly like the agreement said they should be. So even if you have all these countries, all the big countries that are compliant, if the big countries are not funding the smaller countries like the agreement said they should, the smaller countries won't be able to meet the expectations.
That's right.
So this is why I was telling people, I was explaining this stuff to ordinary voters about Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders said he wanted to change his foreign policy to be more focused on fighting climate change and have these global partnerships to get this done instead of financing endless war. So instead of financing this giant military industrial complex that Joe Biden is financing right now, you can take that money like, all right, let's create a funding mechanism with all our allies so we can fund this climate initiative. And Bernie Sanders said he wouldn't do that. So even if Bernie won, I want people to understand, even if Bernie won, we still would have had a hard, tough fight.
That's right. No, you're
but
not
now
wrong
without
on that.
him, and without him, but now with someone who don't even believe in the tenets of the Green New Deal, I'm sorry to say, like, a lot of people sell hope. I'm not selling fear. I'm just telling you guys, it's good. We don't have anyone in government that effectively fighting climate change. Having John Kerry as a climate envoy is a joke. Like he's an oil driller, a fracker, and they literally approved even more oil drilling permits. So we got all this stuff going on. Right, Tim. We got all this stuff going on. We got COVID going on. We got economic collapse going on. We got these racial protests going on. And then we still got climate change.
And we still got climate change.
I'm not even mad at people for not covering that much because there's so much going on. But I just want to remind people because I'm part. And one thing I did as an activist before I got Bernie, I was volunteering with Casey Sunrise and Sunrise Movement because I got a niece. She's 6 years old. I want to live a long life. I want my grandkids to live a long life.
No, I mean, you're not wrong. If we don't do something about climate change, none of these other issues are going to matter because there will be no planet left. And, I think back as you're talking to the DNC meeting that I covered, not last summer, the summer before, obviously pre-COVID, where the Sunrise Movement came in and shut down the DNC meeting. There was a debate going on as to whether or not they should sanction a climate change debate. And why would that even be controversial if you're supposed to be the party that is fighting climate change? But it was, Simone Sanders got up there and argued against it. And then when it went to the floor vote, you had Maria Cardona, who is a DNC member, and she's also a fossil fuel lobbyist. She was the first to get up and speak against it as well. And some of the arguments that they were using were, well, if we have a debate about climate change, then we also have to have a debate about, racial injustice. And I'm sitting there going like, well, maybe you should just have a debate about both of these things. Why limit yourself? If these are the issues that your voters care about, why shouldn't they hear from every single presidential primary candidate about what those positions are that they hold, right?
100% agree. And
now
that same topic is why I always tell people, especially if you really believe in electoral politics, that's one thing that you're largely focused on. It's crucial for you to put pressure on Bernie Sanders and the squad and all of them, because if we have our communities that are donating to these candidates and we are putting our energy to these candidates, I don't think it's unreasonable to demand that they support defund police and support these ideas that benefit our communities.
Right.
And we put our work into those those politicians. And that's something that I always advocate a lot on my page. So a lot on my channel.
Let me ask you this, Nick, because that's the perfect segue into something else I want to talk about. So the exit polls from 2016 to 2020 are very telling, I think, in many areas. The first would be that Biden is not very popular, even though he won the election. That, to me, is just not a strong mandate for him per se. It's a strong mandate against anything that's just simply not Trump, right? But the other really telling aspect of the exit polling that the Democratic Party seriously has not addressed and should be very worried about is the fact that there was a 4% increase in votes for Donald Trump from 2016 to 2018 from the African American community. That's a substantial increase. And it says to me that here's a block of voters that the Democratic Party has traditionally relied on. They've referred to as their firewall, which as far as I'm concerned is incredibly racist in its base, because now you're basically saying we don't have to do anything to earn your votes. We're just going to assume they're ours, and that's just the way it is. That's really messed up. So I want to play for you an interview I did at a Trump rally with a gal that is an activist with Blacks for Trump. And I think this is a really uncomfortable space for a lot of white liberals, and I'll tell you why. Well, you probably already know why. Let me tell the audience why. There's a tendency for liberals to believe that the Black community is monolithic in its beliefs, and that those beliefs mirror whatever it is that they think that should be, right? But this is simply not the case. This is a group like any other group that has a variation in beliefs, a variation in thoughts and conclusions. So it's really important that folks understand that and listen to what's being said, because if you don't listen to what's being said, you're not going to be able to address any of the problems, right? So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is they're really bothered by the idea that anybody that is a person of color would support Trump. And I think part of that problem, too, stems from the fact that a lot of these folks haven't gone into the community and had the communications with them. They don't understand the reasons that people are upset, the reasons they feel like they're being ignored. And that's sort of where this is stemming from. For me personally, I understand that anger and where it's coming from. I don't necessarily think that Trump is the guy that's going to fix it. In fact, I know he's not. I think people that have really looked at his policies and what he's done, who he appointed to his cabinet, the John Tanton people that he put into DHS, would see very clearly that he's not going to, come through with these promises he's making. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a segment of the population that's in the black community that is also responding to those arguments because they're not being heard by the Democratic Party. So that's where this is coming from. So I want to play the interview, Nick, and I would really like to hear what your thoughts are on what she's saying.
Lots of gays back our president.
Woo! Gays back Trump.
Lots of gays back Trump.
That's right.
So the black people.
You going right?
No, we're not black. What are you talking about? We're not black. Biden said we're not black, so that's why
I go back to the store and suck shells for him. It's all gets turned around. And I'm sure it's probably connected because I'm an educated, strong black woman that white people try to say that I'm oppressed and harassed because I'm black and there's the systemic white racism. I'm here to tell you that I'm not. That there is no systemic white racism. Okay, I can do anything a white person can do. I probably do it better because I'm educated. I can give you 55 different examples of how Trump is not racist. I can give examples of how Biden is racist. This person up here claims that doesn't know anything about how Trump is racist, but can't give an example. Give that one example that everybody says there's good people on both sides, but yet doesn't actually know the actual next sentence of it. But if Trump is racist, he's the worst racist I've ever known. Let's look up. I'm gonna do this right here. He has given more money for historically black colleges. The other guy didn't do that.
Is that the end of the? Okay, so I understand where she's coming from, but I don't think Trump is really addressing those issues. So, what are your thoughts on that, Nick?
Yeah, I would love to have a conversation with her.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, because I told this story on my show before, and the funniest thing I have my good friend Becky with me too. So one day I will have her on and back her up. To make it a long story short, when I was canvassing with South Carolina, I met a lady who was a Republican who voted for George Bush, and she loved Bernie Sanders, and we got along really well. In a nutshell, Bernie Sanders and his movement dragged her from the right and pretty much turned her to a lefty. And she was with me when I was talking to this black guy in South Carolina. Very friendly guy. He was like, I'm a black Republican. I consider myself a black Republican. And I sat down and I had a conversation with him, and I'm very happy how it went. I talked about it on my show before, where he said, and I'm gonna present his arguments, and I'm gonna tell you guys how I approached it. This is how you approach these people, and this is how I flip these people. Because he said, I am a black Republican because if you look at what the Democratic Party has done nothing for our communities, and he was really religious, extremely religious as well. And this is where social conservative beliefs came in. He was like, I think the Democrats, they want to destroy the family unit, and they want black women to be single parents, and they make policies so they single parents. That's why they support abortion. Like he was like using all these social conservative arguments, and his core belief was the Democrats and have policy that destroy the black family, and Republicans, they have family values. They believe in Jesus. They believe in actually family stability. And the best way to prop up the black community is by having a strong family unit that the Democratic Party is trying to destroy. And I literally listened and I'm letting him explain this. I'm like, dude, believe it. At first he was kind of combative, but he was actually kind of nice. I was like, dude, believe it or not, watch. I bet you we got more in common than you think we do. Because you want to increase the quality of black life and black families, right? So family value matters a lot to you, right? He like, yeah. I was like, okay. So what would help the black family more than a black family having a living wage?
Yeah.
What would help a black family more than we have paid family leave? Then we have a 40-hour work week. Because I'm like, I know black fathers. Me and my friend Anthony Clark, we talk about this. There's a big myth of the absent black father. The myth of the absent black father is literally tied in capitalism. And this also goes into criminal justice. Well, I'm not going to tie that much into this story, but we are targeted, and we ones are most likely to work overtime, and we don't have family leave in these kind of programs. So I'm telling them, I'm like, bro, we implement Medicare for all that will save black American family money, and we have good jobs for black Americans, like including rejecting the trade deals that both. Like I'm like connected with them. I'm like, bro, the Democrats support the trade deals that Bernie Sanders did. Like I'm arguing on behalf of Bernie Sanders at that point. I'm like, bro, I'm against those trade deals that ruin our community too. Like I'm 40 high wage. I'm against Jeff Bezos. Like Republicans and Democrats, like he's like, I hate Jeff Bezos. Like they have policy that boosts his power. Like Republicans are boosting his power. I'm like, I want to go after him. And I explained to him, like, bro, once you implement my policies and you uplift the black community from the bottom up, you're gonna improve our black quality of life. Because I'm like, at the end of the day, I was like, you said some things I don't necessarily agree with, but I'm like, bro, at the end of the day, I see that you want black families and you want black Americans to thrive. So the best way to do that is by implementing the progressive policies. And then I literally bring up, and this is why these policies are popular. I'm like, do you think we should have healthcare? Like, yeah, hell yeah. And I'm using right wing lingo. Like, I'm using it. I'm like, bro, no taxation without representation. Like, bro, how we pay taxes but we don't have health care? And I talk about war with people. Like there's a liberal mindset that most people don't care about foreign policy, but that's honestly not true, bro. Like, if you honestly just lay it out, I'm like, I literally told him, like, bro, they spend all this money blowing up brown people overseas, but then I take care of our community. And he's a right winger, and he was like, yeah. Like, I literally got him to nod along with me. Then at the end, I'm like, bro, so you got the Republican Party that implemented these policies that are in black. And then at the end of the day, I didn't get him to verbally commit that he would vote for Bernie Sanders, but he was like, you know what, I'm gonna have to look into him. Nice. So if I talk to that lady, I'm like, okay, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying about family value. I see where she's coming from, because she's talking about Trump doing all this stuff for the black community,
right?
And how Democrats didn't do anything for the black community. I'm like, okay, yeah, Barack Obama tanked black wealth. Trump has done nothing for that. Like, yeah, I'll lay out exactly how racial income inequality got worse,
right,
under Donald Trump. You have this COVID situation where you're seeing a general pattern that happened to capitalism.
Yeah.
What's the pattern?
Right.
Black people, we live under rugged individual capitalism. We never benefited from the New Deal policy that a lot of white families benefit from, and they got their generational wealth from. So we built our generational wealth come from the beginning, because we never had those policies. So we built our wealth up from the ground up. Despite being smeared as lazy, despite being attacked from all sides, from people who obsessed with punching down instead of punching up, we build wealth, and we have done it multiple times. And then in the capitalism, the failed system that is capitalism, it crashes every 10 years. In 2008, we built that wealth, and we was doing better than we ever been. And then the economy crashed, and then Obama and his boys built out Wall Street and let black wealth tank. And then, despite all of that, we started to slowly gain ground again, and COVID-19 hit. Now wealth got wiped out again. So instead of this right-wing fantasy that they live under, explain to them in simple, nonpartisan facts. Because the liberal mind, the liberal brain would never convince that person. I promise you. If you had the standard Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden supporter, talking to that black lady, they would have no chance. I promise you. I would at least have her meet me on the middle ground at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some things we're not going to come to agreement on, but I guarantee you I can get her out of this fantasy if she's somewhat open-minded that she is being led off the cliff by black conservatives, because I made the argument that liberal black boomers are leading our generation off the cliff, and you're being led off the cliff by salt and pepper or whatever that, I don't know. I hope I didn't throw salt and pepper. No, Diamond and Silk. Sorry, salt and pepper. Diamond and Silk. Sorry, salt and pepper. Diamond and Silk. You guys getting let off. You guys getting taken on the plantation with them. I like using that term. I tell people, like, the black people that vote Democrat, they stuck on the plantation. I like that. Fuck it, it's a good term. But if you follow in Diamond and Silk, you're on the plantation too. You're just on the right wing plantation.
You're just on the right.
You got people on the left wing plantation, and then you got people on the right wing plantation. That lady you saw in the Trump video, she's on the right wing plantation with Diamond and Silk. Yeah. I'm telling people, like, why do black people need to support one political party? And whenever I talk to a black conservative, a black liberal, I can at least get them to sympathize with me on that one fact. And
I think that's a good tactic. It makes sense to me, Nick, because you're right. It's the divide isn't necessarily this; it's this, right? The plutonomy's up here. The working class, no matter what your race is here, right? And it's the 99-1. And Trump wasn't going to deal with that. And you're right. Pete Buttigieg is not going to deal with it. None of those guys were. I think that's the problem. So you're right. Somebody like Bernie Sanders appeals to these folks more because he's actually addressing the underlying financial reasons, the economic reasons as to why folks are hurting. And it's and it is the case that I think the black community is socially quite conservative. I don't think that that's necessarily a controversial statement. I think there's a lot of folks that that are religious and they believe in these values, right? So that's something that the Democratic Party really needs to assess and think about, because they're not doing it now. I mean, I think about when Biden made that statement, if you're not black, you're not voting for Biden. I mean, this was kind of an offensive statement. Why would he say such a thing? It just completely writes off a big chunk of the community.
Yeah, if you dive into the complexities of their arguments, whenever I listen to these black MAGA fraudsters, I like to call them, it's their rhetoric is based on fighting classism. At the end of the day, that's the underlying issue of what they're bringing up. And the thesis of what she is saying is, she's saying that even though Trump may be this rich guy, at least he did something for my community, even though that's not true. But
but that's what she feels, right? Because at least he made some inroads as far as talking about the colleges was one of the things I think she had talked before. She allowed me to film her. We had a conversation, and that was something that mattered to her, and I could understand why that would matter. So,
yeah, so that's why when I think that from a libertarian socialist perspective, I can come to common ground with a lot of people, and that's why having like a left-wing populist perspective, that's how you reach common ground. That's how you reach these people, and that's why people who are more bourgeoisie, the Elizabeth Warren people who are supporters, they will have a very, very hard time coming to making any ground with that lady, because I guarantee you, if I just bring up very simple conservative ideals, I can flip those to a progressive ideals as well. Like, once again, you say you for small government, I'm for small government as well. Legalize marijuana. So that's a program that justifies stuff. Because that's my ideology. My ideology is all about stuff that justifies stuff. I'm looking at giant police budgets that don't justify stuff.
No.
How about we have funding for mental health care? That justifies stuff. Medicare for all, save money, boost jobs, boost the economy, save lives. That's a program that justifies stuff. So, and when I'm like talking to people, I'm like, bro, you say you believe in don't tread on me, but you supporting the guy who keep extending the Patriot Act, who advancing NSA spying, who too much of a coward to pardon Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. And I promise you, liberals never bring that up, but bring that up to most people and they be like, you're making a good point. Like, you're making a good point. And those are people you build coalitions with, and that's how you win. And that's the focus that the left wing must have right now.
That's right. And the Democratic Party is ignoring that, and they do it at their own peril, in my opinion. I think everything you're saying right now makes perfect sense. If you reach out to these folks, they can be convinced to support things like Medicare for all and to join the Democratic Party. But as long as the Democratic Party is fighting against that, they're imperiling themselves. I think that's definitely the case. Your latest article that I read yesterday on Substack is about why Medicare for all is innately a pro-black policy. Walk us through this article, because it's a really great piece.
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing my canvassing for Brian, I remember I had a lot of people, because that was like the first on the ground report. And I'll say that's when I got my feet wet, because I would tell people what I saw in the field, and I was telling people like, man, I'm connecting with these black voters, and Medicare for all is a winner. And I was saying at the time, like, a lot of people read my tweets, and a lot of people think I'm just trying to make a banging tweet or whatever. Right. But I'm like, I can explain all my tweets if you give me long form. So I tweeted a lot throughout the primary, and I kept saying that Medicare for all is the most pro-black policy platform. So I'm like, and I even took a step forward. I'm like, bro, if you're not supporting Medicare for all, you are anti-black. I'll go on the offensive with my rhetoric, and people think I'm being inflammatory, but I'm like, read the article, because I'm like, there's a healthcare genocide going on of our people right now. I mean, if you look at the numbers, if these numbers existed in any other statistic, like if you look at the amount of black people who died because they had lack healthcare, and then put that under the section where it said black on black crime, watch how much the news will talk about it. Right. It's insanity. So right now in our country, despite us being 13% of the population, we're only 13% of the population. We hold 31% of the recurring medical debt.
That's insane.
And now, once again, if you have basic understanding of where our income lay at, and the fact that we literally have less than 1/10 of the wealth of white families, I mean, we barely have any money. We don't have any money in our savings, and then we are burdened with this medical debt that is leaving people in poverty. I know people in my family that had the audacity of getting healthcare, getting mental health, and now they got medical debt.
Oh man.
For what? What was their crime? What was their crime? And under our healthcare system, because we have a system that inherently discriminates against African American women when it comes to reporting their pain. That's why they got a highest level of infant mortality, and not even close. Like it's like 3-4 times higher than the rate of white women.
Per capita, it's outrageous. Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you look at the life expectancy of Black men, it's 5 years lower than the closest male.
That's crazy.
Because why that is? I tell you what, I can tell you right now. My grandfather should live another 15 years. Grandfather died in his 70s, and he did better than the average Black man. The average Black man lived to be 69.5 years old.
Wow.
Because we don't go to the doctor. I don't go to the doctor. I don't know when last time I went to the doctor. We got home remedies. We got home remedies we rely on. We don't go to the doctor. My grandparents, they never went to the doctor, never go to the dentist because it costs too much. And that's the direct result of this Black health crisis that's going on. And now we have this Black healthcare crisis that's been going on in our community for generations. This has been going on. And now we have COVID-19 that hit. And now it's way worse because we are dying at a rate way higher than white people. And then just to show the racial health disparities, when I was doing my research, I was shocked to find out that when we actually go to the hospital, and I cover this in my piece, when we actually get admitted to the hospital, we die at a lower rate than anyone else with COVID-19.
Oh.
Because of a lot of different factors.
Okay.
I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to get into it, but a lot of different factors. So once we get healthcare, we survive.
That's great.
But this is a damning fact of our healthcare system, though, because what happens is we had a Black nurse that was featured in the Washington Post in December because she talked about this, how our racist healthcare system is literally turning back Black people because some reason, and this is part of the racial discrimination that happens. Yeah. We are treated like supermen and superwomen, where our pain is always magnified. Like that's why our infant mortality rate is so high. When Black women tell a doctor or nurse that they're going through pain, for some reason they're not believed as much as a white patient, or whenever we're showing some sort of any sort of symptom for illness, they just think we would just want some drugs. Like it's always a deep racial discrimination that goes on. So there are a lot of times in Black communities where we didn't have access to text. We were showing up at the hospitals literally on death's door, and we would get denied unless you were rich and famous. And I made that post at the time. I'm like, I remember when they tested all the NBA basketball teams, and they get tested around the clock. I'm like, how did they get that testing, but our community can't done? And then you have these rich people in the Trump administration who got COVID. I remember Chris Christie. He got COVID, got airlifted into the hospital.
Right.
Does that access exist?
No.
For Black families and Black Americans, and for poor and disenfranchised people, it doesn't. Right. Like our healthcare system is an illegal mafia that is killing people right now. And I said it before. I would never apologize for not voting for anyone who don't support Medicare for all. That is my litmus test. Because if you don't support that, after understanding the healthcare crisis that's going on in our community, I can't come to any other conclusion.
Yeah.
Then you're anti-Black. Because if you look at Joe Biden and his healthcare plan right now, he want to boost COBRA. He want to
I know. It's terrible.
Obamacare.
It's a handout to health insurers across the board.
Who do you think that's unaffordable for? It's going to be unaffordable for Black Americans that are already going through a health crisis right now. We can't afford those deductibles. I think that they said the average premium would be like $300, $400. I think Andrew Perez wrote that in the Daily Poster. He did a great piece breaking it down. It's literally a completely unaffordable plan. I'm not sure how, after post-COVID, how Black Americans supposed to survive this. Because now they had an executive order that opened up the healthcare markets again. And I'm looking through these prices. I'm like, bro, I don't know how the working family supposed to survive the support for this right now.
It's crazy.
And now, and talking about healthcare, I dive in that in my article, because people bring up all these other alternatives, like the public option, and then like COBRA. And I'm like, even the public option with all its flaws, which has a lot of flaws, it's still better than our current healthcare system. And Biden and his team, they already backed down from that.
I know.
Because even with the public option, we at least have the problem with that is we will have a multi-tier level healthcare, which we already do now. It will just be a little bit more structured. But the healthcare pool will be extremely bloated. It will lead to lower quality of care. We won't have freedom of healthcare like we have now. Because under Medicare for All, you will see any doctor you want. But if you have the public plans, what if you have a hospital that have high quality care and say, oh no, we don't take the public plan?
Right.
That could happen. I mean, that happens to people right now under Obamacare. That happens to people. They have public plans in California. I was talking to my friend Jackie. They have plans in California.
Yeah,
they
Medicaid.
literally do that. Yeah, you literally have people that can't go to certain doctors.
That's right.
And this is the kind of stuff I bring up. And who do you think this affects? Because you look at these rural communities where access to care is already hard for Black families, and you got these healthcare plans where they can't even see what the doctor they want to go to.
That's right.
I don't know. Like the idea of having a doctor is hilarious to me. Like when has that never even been a thing? I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go to some clinic. Okay, like there's not the state of like this ideal healthcare system never existed for Black Americans, and that's what I wanted my article to touch base on.
No, you're not wrong. And in California, the plan would be Medicaid. And, for example, I have somebody I've interviewed that is with Doctors for Bernie, and they're a group that is pushing for Medicare for all in the state. But one of the things that he mentioned to me was that if you needed to see a dermatologist, there was like 3 dermatologists that you could go to if you were on this plan. That's it, that's crazy. And he did a breakdown across the board, but you're right. It's very limited, and it shouldn't be. Let's switch gears for a second and talk about ICE. So ICE has now decided to go rogue, basically, for lack of a better word, and they are ignoring Biden's executive order to stop the deportations. What do you think is going on there?
And this is why we can't accept middle ground on these issues. I've been raising an alarm on abolishing ICE for a long time. That's why I was very supportive of Bernie Sanders' campaign. I was very surprised and shocked to see that he supported abolishing ICE. And that was a very, very big boom for Bernie Sanders that separated himself from everyone else in the field. But then as soon as Biden took over, I'm like, okay, are you guys as outraged as ICE as I am, or is it performative? Because when I look at kids in cages, when I see the human rights violation that's going on with ICE, a lot of people don't know. Like a lot of liberals are at brunch right now. That's right. But there's been hunger strikes at ICE facilities going on for weeks, like because of access to care because of COVID-19 and conditions in COVID-19. I mean, there's been a lot of accounts from migrants who told their stories of how they had literally no access to healthcare during the course of COVID-19. You have people that are literally about to die, like about to pass out, their skin turning black, and then they'll give them water and say, just make sure you drink a lot of water, get a lot of rest. And people are dying. You have people that treat like I don't think people understand how bad it was. It's bad. You had the conditions in some of these ICE facilities was so bad that you had some of the migrants was like, you might as well just stay back in my country so I can get killed. I'd rather have that than this, because they were being poorly fed, they have very poor nutrition, actually no access to health care. If people had COVID, they was on top of each other, not getting no medical care. They were like, and then it's even worse when they got sick, because there's a account of when they get sick with COVID, they pretty much get locked in solitary confinement with no health care, and they suffer. And there was someone who shared a story with The Guardian, and he shared how there was multiple people who tried to commit suicide in these detention centers. And then when you look at the overall quality of the detention centers, I don't know how anyone can come to the conclusion that it's anything other than a concentration camp, because
they're bad.
And once again, I can focus on Black issues because I can speak on that, but I stand in solidarity with everyone with all the issues and how this affected the Latino community. Yeah. But I want people to understand, I really want Black activists to understand that this is just as much of a Black issue as anyone else. That's why I'm going to talk about that when I do my ICE piece as well. Because do you know who ICE is going after? They go after at a disproportionate rate.
Not white people.
Immigrants from Cameroon. They've been going after them.
African asylum seekers, that's correct.
Yeah, they've been torturing them at the facilities to get their signatures. Like, it's literally the worst of humanity we're seeing at these detention centers. And as we see now with ICE going rogue, my question to liberals was, how do you reform this system? Because who will be attracted to the system in the first place? Right. The people who will be attracted to this system are the people who want to attack, people of color who want to implement the racial hierarchy. You're not getting the best. You're not getting the best people who want to sign up to be an ICE agent to commit human rights violations, and that leads to the speculation. I mean, there's tons of story about sexual assault cases at ICE detention. There's a very large problem with migrants saying they was sexually assaulted. And now my question for liberals and the Biden administration is, how do you account for that? Because I looked into like who is actually holding people accountable. Like if you have a complaint of being sexually assaulted as a migrant, there is no chain for you to climb.
That's right.
There's absolutely no chain. There are people that log complaints to DHS. Those complaints got stuck in bureaucracy. They never got into it. I mean, there's literally a large documentation how you have all these complaints and there's no accountability. So at what point and what reforms can you put that will actually have accountability for them? You can't, because this is a inherently broken, inhumane system.
Yeah,
I think everyone needs to call for that.
Nick, part of it. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done. I was going to say, Nick, part of it is the fact that he also signed an executive order to end federal prisons being owned by private corporations, but the ICE detention centers were excluded from that, and ICE detention centers are being run by private corporations, CCA being one of them. So I think there is an interwoven sort of situation that's going on there. And in fact, let's play a clip for you in the audience in which there was a group, I believe this was in the Georgia facility, but they were able to upload some things to YouTube in protest about what was going on in that particular detention facility. And part of it, too, as related to the COVID thing that you're talking about, is that there's now been a report, I think it was released by Harvard and Physicians for Human Rights. They're not even being given soap to wash their hands with, let alone any other PPE during this crisis of coronavirus. So it's completely being ignored. But let's go ahead and play that and we can talk about what these ladies are saying.
On Monday, ICE confirmed the 20th person to die in its detention in fiscal year 2020, making it one of the deadliest periods in the agency's history. Cipriano Chavez Alvarez was a 61-year-old Mexican immigrant who'd been held at the Stewart Detention Center in Lumpkin, Georgia, and died in a nearby hospital. His passing marks the third COVID-19 fatality at that jail and the 8th known COVID death in ICE custody. ICE says nearly 5,700 prisoners nationwide have been infected with COVID. This comes as an explosive complaint filed on behalf of a whistleblower nurse, accuses a different ICE jail in Georgia, the Irwin County Detention Center, of failing to protect both prisoners and employees from the virus. The whistleblower, Dawn Wooten, was a nurse at the jail. She said it failed to adhere to coronavirus safety protocols. She also alleges a large number of unwanted hysterectomies have been performed on prisoners by a local doctor known as the uterus collector. The complaint does not name a specific staff doctor, but lawyers for several people detained there have told Tina Vasquez at Prism and other news outlets, including the New York Times, that he's an obstetrics and gynecology specialist named Mahendra Amin, who has an office in the city of Douglas near the ICE jail. 9 women detained in Irwin managed to film and have uploaded to YouTube in April. The women wore makeshift masks and held signs that said, "There are sick people here. We are not criminals, and please help." One by one, they came forward to tell their stories.
I work in intake. I see the people who enter. I see how the guards work. All I saw is that they ask people to leave when they enter, men, women, whoever. They don't attend to them. They don't ask them the necessary questions to diagnose them. We are at risk. They don't give us anything to cover ourselves so that we can protect ourselves. I was the first person that got sick. I went to the clinic and that it lasted no more than 5 minutes. They didn't give me necessary resources. They simply told me, "You're fine, go back to your cell." We need protection, please. All we want is for people to listen to their conscience, their hearts. Because we are so many mothers in this place who are suffering so much, so many humiliations for the love of God. Why can't ICE understand? Why do we have to wait more than a year to get a court date?
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. This week, immigrant rights activists launched a new campaign called We Are Home to push President Biden and Democratic majorities on Capitol Hill to create a pathway to citizenship for 11 million undocumented immigrants. Biden included the pathway to citizenship in a proposal he announced on his first day in office last week, along with 6 executive orders dealing with immigration. Politico now reports Congress may break the proposal into parts. Biden also ordered a pause on all U.S.-Mexico border wall construction, but billions of dollars of unfinished work remains under contract with the federal government. Activists in over a dozen U.S. cities held a day of action Sunday, urging him to take further steps to stop the construction. Meanwhile, Biden's 100-day deportation pause took effect Friday, and it's facing a challenge from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who argues an agreement the Trump administration signed in its final weeks with Arizona, Indiana, Louisiana, and Texas entitles them to a 180-day consultation period. Since Trump left office last week, his former senior advisor on immigration, Stephen Miller, has emerged as a right-wing media personality. He went on Fox News' The Ingraham Angle Friday to attack Biden's immigration plan.
If you read the text of this order, it is breathtaking and mind-boggling in its scope. It halts all deportations for 100 days, including...
Okay, so yes, I nod a lot. By the way, I'm laughing at somebody in the chat said it's subconscious. I'm a very active listener. Anyway, so Nick, some of the things that they're talking about here they're really offensive and repulsive, and sterilization of these women. They were taken to see somebody that was apparently doing sterilization, tubular things, etc. What is actually going on here? This sounds like eugenics to me.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I heard I heard some rumors that's like very terrifying, because people tie this with the story of the rampant sexual assaults. And there was accounts from foreign migrants how they thought they may be getting these hysterectomies. They may have been doing that as a way to cover for pregnancies as well. So that's a way for them to cover the tracks. I mean, when you look at the massive amount of whistleblowing that's been going on regarding the sexual assault cases when it comes to ICE, and that's just one of many reasons why we got to get rid of them. There's not any way to really hold them accountable, and they've been using stuff like this as a way to kind of hide their tracks, if they will. So I don't think that's beyond thinking that. But this is, at the end of the day, all these systems are designed to uphold white supremacy, whether it be abolishing ICE, and that's why that's a crucial part of the 10 demands. And that's why, even though Joe Biden is putting in orders and legislating in a way where you want to abolish private prisons, it doesn't really mean much, considering that ICE hold like 75% of the private prison contracts. So either you're opposing white supremacy or you're not. And there are a lot of people who they think they are opposing white supremacy by just opposing Trump, opposing the Proud Boys, and helping Democrats get elected, because they see the only stewards of white supremacy as white people with Nazi tattoos or skinheads. But I always want to remind people that the biggest purveyors of white supremacy are the white people in suits and the right traders that sign the legislation that actually harm the communities of color. So if you are claiming that you stand in solidarity with immigrants, but you're not supportive of abolishing ICE, I can't help but to think that you're just trying to virtual signal. And I hate that term. I actually really do hate that term, but it applies perfectly, because if you're one of the people who was upset during Trump immigration policy, but you want to keep this rogue agency in charge, now that it's been exposed that Biden can't even rein them in, to the extent that even they wanted to rein them in, they can't even do that, because it's not even what they're even asking for is very milquetoast standard amendment on deportations. They can't even follow that. So, and you expect them to crack down on human rights violation and police themselves? Fat chance.
Right. Right. No, ICE is, ICE, if people don't know the history here, I think maybe this needs to be pointed out too. The Department of Homeland Security, which is where ICE is housed, was something that came about under the George Bush years, right? In response to 9/11. So this is not this is not a government organization that we've had for a very long time. Well, long time now, I guess 20 years, but it's stemmed from that. It's unnecessary. ICE used to be housed, the operations that they were doing used to be housed in other areas, right? And they were still working on human trafficking and things of this nature. I think it's important to also note that under the Trump administration, you had several folks appointed to the Department of Homeland Security that were avowed white nationalists. They worked for several of the John Tanton organizations, FAIR, which is the anti-immigration group. So there was definitely agenda there, and the agenda was not only are we going to stop illegal immigration, we're going to stop all immigration. So this is not hyperbole. This is really how it was. So where do you see Biden in all of this, though? So we have a new administration. Do you think Biden would ever consider, changing course on this?
I have a hard time believing this because people need to understand, and this is a point I make on my show all the time, that we have a U.S. empire that operates as a state, and a lot of people, and there's a lot of bad faith actors that try to muddy the water on this concept of the deep state or permanent state. You got clowns like Alex Jones and other right-wing lunatics who use the term deep state as pretty much just to push their anti-Semitism, but literally, Chomsky talk about this. You got academia talk about this all the time, how you have a group of unelected officials that are in charge of our government. And that's why I was telling people I don't see massive changes like this happening, because we brought up before how our immigration system is essentially a giant jobs program. There was a diving done into ICE facility detention centers. And I want people to understand that the ICE facility detention centers, they are a giant industrial complex.
Yeah.
They provide jobs. They provide a lot of revenue for the companies that lease out the contracts with ICE. So there's a giant complex behind that, and that concept is very similar to what we see with the Middle East. So people always wonder why we continue to escalate on wars. So we still have George Bush, who bombed more people than Bill Clinton, and then we had Barack Obama, who ran as a peace candidate, who did the unthinkable. He did the unthinkable. He bombed more people than George Bush and Bill Clinton combined, which is unthinkable. Then Donald Trump runs as a anti-establishment populist, who was a fake one, really. And he said he want to end the wars, and he did something that was even more unthinkable. He bombed more people than Barack Obama did. I think he killed more people with drone strikes in his first year than Obama did the entire time. So you ask yourself, what is happening? Why does U.S. foreign policy never divert? Because there is a complex behind it. There's a complex behind the military, and no matter who gets in charge of that executive branch, unless they have real agenda of making powerful enemies, it's not going to change. Once again, I tell people, even if Bernie Sanders won, it would have been an uphill battle. We would have fought the military-industrial complex, and we would have had to fight Bernie Sanders to keep him to the left, because Bernie Sanders has made a lot of great improvements over his foreign policy, but it's not perfect. He don't have a perfect foreign policy record, but he's been making a lot of improvements over the last few years. And once he get in office, we would have to push him left on drone programs, and for example, and on Julian Assange. So even if Bernie Sanders won, this fight would have continued. But now with Joe Biden, someone who was a part of this machine, who benefited from this machine, someone who advocated fiercely for the Iraq war that is responsible for over 2 million dead Iraqis, and he's not even apologized. He's not even sorry for it. You know how you know he's not sorry for it? Because he got Tony Blinken. He hired him when he was
we talked about that yesterday.
Yeah. So now, once again, I bring this up because I want people to understand state violence ties into U.S. imperialism as well. When we have ICE and we have these mass human rights violation that's going on at the border, that's part of the complex as well. I don't see Joe Biden disrupting that. And that's why it was important for them to stop Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders advocated for abolishing ICE. Once again, Bernie Sanders, I have a lot of criticism because he wasn't in support of a defund police and Julian Assange and all stuff, but he challenged power in a way that I deemed sufficient. But a lot of people understand that he was a compromise. He was a start. The future of the left wing need to be challenging the human rights violations. come from ICE, the military-industrial complex, the fascist police state, founding white supremacy at the root cause. Because once again, liberals, they love to fight Nazis with tattoos and skinheads. But when I talk about fighting white supremacy, I'm talking about that, and I am also talking about the people in suits who legislate against our community.
Right.
So,
I think they
so
sort of
that's why
failed to
I didn't
see
have
it.
expectations. And,
Yeah.
and I see no reason from it coming from a disenfranchised community why I would give Joe Biden benefit of doubt. Why should black people, why should Latinos, why should Muslims, why should anyone give them the benefit of doubt? If Joe Biden does something good, then I'm like, all right, great, do something else. Because as far as I'm concerned, they still owe me for my vote in 2012.
That's
So
right.
as far as I'm concerned. So people always, like, they hold fast food and retail workers at a higher standard than they hold a politician.
Yeah.
Joe Biden could do one good thing. I'm like, okay, we already know he's gonna have executive orders that do decent things. Already see holes in a lot of these, but we already know he's gonna do that. Then it's gonna come to the halt. We already knew this was gonna happen. I don't understand why we gotta feel like we gotta jump up and down and celebrate Joe Biden or celebrate Democrat whenever they do anything, when we should be just keep pushing. Because what he is doing is a duh. And this is what we see Democrats do every time they take over. They halt the extreme right-wing direction that the Republican Party has went to, but they don't advance it any further. So they keep it the Overton window to the right. So that's why I said we got to abolish ICE, because if you don't abolish ICE, you literally done nothing to the Overton window. Because the only thing you did, you attacked Trump on ICE, but now the Overton window is still to the right. You still normalize ICE. So when I say we got to oppose Trumpism in all its form, that's exactly what we must do. And the best way to oppose Trumpism is to get rid of ICE, to get rid of the death penalty. Because Donald Trump was speeding up federal executions at the end of his terms. If you're really upset about that, we should be pressuring Joe Biden to end that, like end all this stuff that's going on. That's 100%. How you really defeat Trumpism.
So let's get some questions from the chat. Anybody that has any questions, go ahead and type those in, and I'll look and write those questions down. But is there, in the meantime, is there anything else that you're working on right now as an activist that we haven't quite covered yet in this discussion that you would like to mention?
Yeah, 2020 was my breakout year in a way. Again, like 50,000 followers on Twitter last year, and that's what people knew who I was. But I feel like this year is the year I gained legitimacy, because I feel like a lot of people mischaracterized me as just some guy on Twitter. But once again, I put in work for the Bernie Sanders campaign. I was out there in the street protesting this summer. I'm fighting for ranked choice voting on the board of National Ranked Choice Voting. I'm on 10 demands. So everything I'm talking about, everything I'm complaining about, like I'm actually fighting for that one way or another, whether it be organized with Casey Sunrise, fighting the homelessness and eviction crisis with Casey tenants. And that's my main focus now. And with my publication that I have on Substack, I want to write more about these kind of things in long form instead of just being on Twitter. So make sure you subscribe on progressivemartialartist.substack, and then I'll be streaming as well. And that's kind of my main focus. I got a lot of great projects with other black leftists that are currently in development. But you guys stay tuned with that. But I got a lot of good things going on. So that's my main focus that I'm focused on right now.
That's awesome.
Keep an eye on my articles, because what we talk about today, whether it be defund police, ICE, my publication is not about the pageantry of politics. It's not about that stupid stuff. It's all about holding our government accountable and reporting on state violence, talking about policy, how it affects our community. That's why I talk about the healthcare crisis going on in the black community, and why Medicare for All was solved. That kind of stuff you can expect what I want to produce. So hopefully you guys check that out and enjoy that.
All right, I've got a couple of questions for you here. They're all good. Of course, somebody wants to go for drinks afterwards.
I will.
So the first one, somebody brought up the fact, which is really interesting, and I'll give you my thoughts on this too. Richard Spencer, which is, if you don't know who Richard Spencer is, he's an avowed neo-Nazi. That is not hyperbole. He considers himself a white supremacist Nazi. That's just what he identifies as, and he endorsed Biden. So the reasons he gave for this, just so people have some context for this, is that, so he sees Trump as completely inept. So he's not necessarily liking Biden. He just thinks Trump is inept. Trump is not delivering on the changes that he said he was going to make. So he would rather have somebody less inept in office, I should say, and maybe not from the same party that he aligns with, and in the meantime put together somebody better for the next 4 years. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a wild thing that happened. Did you pay attention to that when it happened, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny because I actually covered that, and it's funny is like there's no one else that we can rely on better than implement white supremacy than Joe Biden, and that's why me and my friend Jackie, we always call him Jim Crow Joe, because I say it loud all the time. Now I want people to challenge me on this. I say that no one have done more damage to the black community in the last 40 years in public service than Joe Biden has. Because I even want to talk about the crime bill. The crime bill is the obvious one.
Right.
Even the corporate media will reference the crime bill every once in a while. That's how well known it is. But what people don't talk about and what's not reported on enough is the bankruptcy bill and his servitude to the credit card companies. And a lot of the amendments and a lot of things that he supported directly impacted Black Americans. What did we talk about earlier on the show? I talked about how Black Americans hold 31% of the medical debt. Outstanding, despite us only being 13% of the population, only have 1/10 of the wealth of white families. How do you think that happened? Do white progressives think this just happened and poofed out of thin air?
Yeah.
This is because of the policies that Joe Biden supported. He voted against amendments that increased the burdens with those with medical debt. He literally voted for amendments that made it harder for women of deadbeat parents to collect child support. He made it harder to pay off your student loans. Who did that affect the most? Black Americans. So it's easy to talk about law enforcement. And what Black leftists do, we talk about the financial impacts of neoliberalism. Because something that what happened throughout the course of the election that drove me crazy was people saying, "Oh, well, you don't want to vote for Biden, that means you must love fascism or neoliberalism." And this drove me crazy. I talk about this on my show all the time. Fascism is an evil ideology. It must be defeated at all costs. But if you just blindly compare neoliberalism to fascism, that is whitewashing neoliberalism. Because there are two different things, but look at what neoliberalism has done. It destroyed the Black community. It destroyed the Middle East. It literally caused the immigration crisis going on at the border right now. It caused the drug war. So how can you just whitewash all that just by saying, "Oh, what about fascism?" You can't whitewash this by just bringing on fascism because neoliberalism is its own unique evil. Yeah. The policies that Joe Biden has endorsed his entire career is its own unique evil, and that's why I want people. That always why I want people to get across.
Yeah, interesting. No, I disagree. I don't disagree with you about the neoliberalism, and I don't think Richard Spencer agrees with neoliberalism. He's a populist too, but it is interesting that he made that move for the reasons that he made, and it's bizarre.
To go back to Spencer, when we covered that on my show, that's why we wasn't surprised, because we covered it as almost like a duh, and I was covering it as like, I don't know why other right wingers just don't come to the conclusion anyway. When you see Black Lives Matter started under Barack Obama for a reason. I mean, these powerful institutions like the police and the military, they are at their strongest when they got someone they can hide behind identity politics with.
Right.
And as someone who despises the Republican Party and all their actors, it always drove me crazy whenever I see them and liberals pretend that you have presidents like Barack Obama who depleted the military and who wasn't taking care of the police. These units have never been more powerful than they are on Democrats. Like, I want people to understand. I talk about this on my show as well. Then Democrats, they take more money from the police than Republicans do.
Right.
Amy Klobuchar, the dream girl of the Democratic Party, she's the second highest funded Democrat when it comes to fund. I think Bob Menendez is number one. I really hope I don't get that wrong, but I think he's number one. But the thing is him and Klobuchar are the most well-funded people in the Senate with police unions. And then, like, if you look at third and fourth, it's not even close. Like, it's like them two, and then there's a wide gap. Then there's a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans. And then they legislate like it. That's why I'm seeing people pretend that Biden is going to be supportive of Black Lives Matter, and they're supporting Black Lives Matter by defeating Trump. I'm like, Black Lives Matter started under Barack Obama for a reason, and they're going to continue to implement policy that increase the military-industrial complex and the prison-industrial complex. That's why Kamala Harris was chosen in the first place.
Yeah,
that's why
point taken. Yeah.
They love tough on crime prosecutors. That's why they love Amy Klobuchar.
Yeah.
Amy Klobuchar didn't become a superstar on accident. These people don't get promoted on accident. Amy Klobuchar was loved by the police unions. She was well funded by the police unions. So that's the person they always said won every debate because those are the people they want to push.
Which was weird. Did they watch the same debate that we did? Yeah. No, I thought that
exactly. And so I say this because I had a point, because that's why that was my reaction to Biden administration immigration policy, because this is the direction that Democrats want to go. Is in favor of the police, and in favor of ICE, and they will continue to govern in that way. And they will always try to use a smoke screen to apologize for that. Only thing we can do now is just watch them. And they did the most basic immigration executive order that we kind of expected, but it's just how they follow up on that.
Right.
They talk about reuniting parents with kids, and that was celebrated. And I think that's a great executive order. The only problem is this is why you don't keep ICE, because a detail that a lot of people miss on that story is that the Trump administration was not keeping track of the parents of the people. And then the Biden administration, they even admitted they have no idea how they're going to get that accomplished. Because there's 600, I think the number is 603 kids in the last article I read, where they said they actually have no idea where their parents are. Because once again,
it's disgusting.
It wasn't a priority of the Trump administration. So once again, I want Biden to fight it, but good luck, because you're working within a structure that is not designed to do what immigration activists want you to do. So hopefully that kind of answers that question, what I expect out of him on that.
I think it does, yeah. Let me ask you this, because I thought this was also an interesting question. I'm not sure if you can answer it. Apparently there's a lot of racism in the UFC, and what can be done about that? Is this a topic you're familiar with?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I'm the martial art guy. I've talked about I was a real big fan of UFC for a very long time. I've watched a lot of Muay Thai, I love combat sports. And the thing with martial arts, martial arts was groomed and established out of revolution. When you look at a lot of the peasants in old Chinese days and Japanese days, they picked up martial art as a way of rebellion. One of my favorite martial arts of all time is capoeira from Brazil.
Brazilian,
capoeira originated from slaves. Portuguese slaves. And there's many examples of this. A lot of them I'm blank on top of my head. But martial arts started its roots in revolution and as a populist uprising and as a left-wing philosophy. Now, you guys got to understand, you got to separate that from the UFC. Because the UFC is not, it's a high-level martial arts, but it doesn't represent martial arts. It's a business model. Like, there's a lot of different fighters, a lot of different people from a lot of different cultures who got a lot of different political beliefs. Like for example, Colby Covington, he's very popular. He talked a lot of trash. He did the Conor McGregor route. He became popular. But I mean, I'm surrounded by martial arts all the time. I'm like, I'm not seeing any political leaning. Now, so if you're not in the martial arts community, I understand why you come to that conclusion. Like, oh yeah, all martial artists are right-wing thugs. Because you got people like Gina Carano, Dana White was a big Trump
Tito Ortiz.
Yeah, Tito Ortiz. But you see, that's white America. Like, are we talking about the capoeira masters, the Japanese jiu-jitsu instructors? Are we talking about kickboxers? Are we talking about Thailand? Thailand is one of the most socially progressive countries in the world. Yeah. And so when you talk about martial art as a right-wing philosophy, you gotta understand your inherent bias, because you're talking about your Western bias come from the UFC, and they Conor McGregor not even right winger. Like, they all support like universal healthcare. Like, once again, this go back to the point that U.S. is an extremely right wing country. Because if you look at a lot of the martial artists, a lot of beliefs, they were way to the left of the Overton window. Now, I'm not a big fan of the UFC, and then I have a lot of criticism of the way the UFC has been ran over the last few years. Been a fan for a very, very long time. And just like any criticism that you have of the UFC, and any criticism, if you have any entertainment really, whether it be movies, whether it be NFL, whether it be video games, do you know what the underlying mechanism of the complaint is of all of it? It's capitalism.
Yeah.
Capitalism is always the underlying problem. When people talk about video games, why are video games dropping price? Why are there all this controversy around video games and how they treat their employees? It's all capitalism. Yeah. And then when you talk about the UFC and all the problems that the UFC have, there's a massive issues they have with unionization and paying fighters. Like, these are the real issues I'm talking about. And this is the issue that Dana White make worse, because he's a horrible right-wing businessman. Now, you could have people who are of a different belief system who could have picked up martial arts and made it a big thing. But unfortunately, we had right-wing American businessmen like Dana White, who took over, who implemented harsh capitalism that honestly, like, I can talk about this all day, but it really hurt the sport. It really did, because by being cheap on fighter pay like they are, and by ripping off the fighters, you hurt the level of athletes that enter the sport. I mean, there's like if you're someone who is in the NBA or NFL, and if you're that quality of athlete, why will you join the UFC when you got billionaires like Dana White and their company ripping off fighters?
Right.
And this is something I come as a left-wing perspective, and this is a debate that is ignored largely by liberals and by the political establishment, because it's not beneficial for them to talk about fighter pay. I've been in the martial art community for 15, 20 years. This has been something that we've been talking about for a long time. And what is the theme of that? The theme of that is from a left-wing perspective. There are a lot of us that hate the UFC because they don't pay their fighters well.
Yeah.
That's always been a thing. That comes from a left-wing perspective.
Right.
Now you got right-wing people that are like, oh yeah, we shouldn't. That's a very small minority of people like, yeah, I think UFC pay their fighters pretty well. The UFC does a really good job of having shills. But my overall point I'm trying to make here is, yeah, they got some big names that are right-wing, but it's not smart to just paint it as a right-wing brush. And I'm not saying that there's not a big right-wing influence on martial artists, but we're not a monolith. I mean, I'm a progressive martial artist. I know a ton of progressive martial artists and lefty martial artists out there. And in the large scheme of things, you can see a lot of left-wing ideas that come out of martial arts. It is, right now, the biggest power and influence is from the right wing, the UFC. And I don't think they really do a good job representing martial arts. Like, I'm much more now into kickboxing, Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, more of a more combat based. And I watch like the big fights every once in a while, but
right on.
I understand why. I know I ramble. I can talk about martial arts forever, but to make it a very short nutshell answer, yeah, there's a lot of right wing elements in UFC, but martial arts is much bigger than a lot of people give credit for. And if you look at the roots of capoeira, a lot of martial arts, they come from a left wing revolutionary perspective. It's just all about how you implement it in your life, and that's what I want to do. I want to spread progressive martial arts. So it's all about how you what lens you're looking at it, because there are a lot of different communities in martial arts that I think should be defined as progressive. But
you should get all those guys together and do a show like all of the progressive
I know a lot of
martial
them
artists.
On Twitter. Yeah, I know a lot of them on Twitter.
Get them together, dude. I would totally tune into that. I would completely listen to that.
I have people from like Bloody Elbow, like that's another MMA.
Bloody Elbow.
I had a lot of people from that's another big left. That's another not left, but sorry.
That's his fight name.
MMA publication, pretty much MMA.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of people in MMA where that follow me and like, oh yeah, I'm glad I see no lefty martial artists. So there's a lot of us out there.
Well, I'm thinking like Muay Thai with the elbows, right?
Yeah, Muay Thai. That's elbows, knees, eight points of contact. My favorite. My favorite martial art. I came from a boxing background, and
right on.
My dad was a multi-time Golden Glove champion. I was very confident in my hands. I remember my first Muay Thai coach was this Vietnamese guy who was only like 140 pounds, and we sparred. I love sparring. I sparred countless amount of rounds with professional fighters, and I always usually do well. Not to brag, but I just had a lot of boxing background. But I sparred with this Muay Thai guy in my early 20s. Maybe I was like 21 or so. And he was kicking me. I was like, bro, I'm not used to, like, as a boxer, I was not used to that. And
those guys can fight. I've seen live Muay Thai fights. It's amazing.
And I fell in love with it ever since then, because I always like boxing. I've always been a fighter at heart, but I've always been really into martial arts, especially since then. I really fell in love with coaching, and you never know. Like I always thought the idea of doing it professionally, because I spar with those people, and that it's something that I'm passionate about. That's why I don't want to drop the name Progressive Martial Arts. I don't talk much about martial arts, because I don't follow the UFC as hardcore as I used to. Just because I have a lot of I know a lot more than my average person, but I don't follow it. Like back in the day, I could tell you every single fighter.
Well, you know more than I do.
Yeah. So stay tuned. I mean, you never know. I might take my fight one day.
Well, get those guys together that you know that are all progressive in martial arts, and you should do a show and put it up, because I think people would be interested in hearing.
I want to train a group of lefty martial artists, because they want to talk about punching Nazis. I want to teach them how to do it the proper way. Yeah. That's my goal. I want to teach. I want an army like people like the right wing. They're afraid of Antifa right now. Just wait until I get my army of
people that know how to actually punch Nazis. I'm here for this.
Martial artists.
Anyway, Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show today. You've been an absolutely wonderful guest. I've enjoyed our conversation. I've nodded quite a bit, obviously. Really appreciate it. I hope that people will watch this and learn a little bit about how to be better allies, maybe to the Black community, in various ways that they can message more effectively. I think you've made some really great points today. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be on. It was super fun.
Right
we
on.
can do this all day, but I'm just glad to be on Status Coup again. I'm a big fan of what you guys do.
Excellent.